You're riding with me. Gideon Gentry growled, sawing through the noose knotted around Naomi Rhodes's shattered wagon tongue. 3 riders spilled into the far end of the canyon before the rope struck the dust, and Gideon pulled his brown gelding close, one arm braced around the pregnant widow, while his free hand warned the threat back. Naomi caught his sleeve. "Only if you get me to Vesta Brennan Station before sunset. The woman on that stage can prove who murdered my husband." Nevada heat rolled from the canyon walls. Naomi stood with one arm around the heavy curve of her belly, 7 months gone, and near spent from the road. Her face was gray beneath the dust, but her eyes stayed fixed on the riders. Gideon set himself between her and the open trail. His Colt remained holstered. "They're coming fast," she said. "They are." He looked from the approaching dust to the broken wagon. The tongue had been cut nearly through before the last hard jolt snapped it. The noose had not been meant to tow anything. "Can you ride?" Doesn't leave much choosing. There is always a choice. The hoofbeats grew louder. "I can hide you in those rocks and draw them off. Or I can put you in my saddle and take you to Vesta's. But you say which." Naomi glanced at the rope in the dirt. Her fingers tightened over the child beneath her dress. "Put me on the horse." Gideon stepped close enough for her to see his hands. "May I lift you?" A flicker of surprise crossed her face. Then she nodded. He lifted her, carefully settled her in the saddle, and placed the reins across the horn within her reach. He did not climb up behind her. He seized the cheek strap and ran, leading the gelding up the steep trail as a shout cracked through the canyon below. They cleared the ridge with the riders less than a quarter mile behind. Granite swallowed the sound of pursuit. Gideon kept moving until the canyon lay a mile behind them and the scrubland opened in every direction. Once a rifle cracked below the ridge. The ball struck stone far to their left, too wild to wound and close enough to declare intent. Naomi did not scream. She bent low over the saddle horn while Gideon dragged the gelding through a cut choked with rabbit brush. The hoofbeats faded, then returned in ragged bursts whenever the wind shifted. Twice Gideon caught a low smear of dust moving along a southern rise. Crane's riders were no longer close enough to shoot straight, but they had not quit. Only then did Gideon slow enough to save the horse. Naomi swayed in the saddle. Gideon walked at the gelding's shoulder, close enough to catch her, but not touching her. He had spent 12 years moving cattle and escorting freight across hard country. He knew bad ground tired horses, and men who used a crowd as a weapon. 6 months earlier in Kansas, he had watched such a crowd drag a ranch hand named Billy from a saloon. Gideon had known the boy was frightened of horses, much less capable of stealing a prize mare. He had stayed at the bar because the men were many, his job was uncertain, and silence had seemed cheaper than courage. Billy had been found hanging from a cottonwood at dawn. The real thieves were caught a week later. Since then, Gideon had stopped waiting for loud men to become reasonable. Everyone along the overland route knew Naomi's name. Earl Crane had seen to that. Her husband, Thomas, had kept books for the stage line. After a coach was robbed and Thomas was found shot beside the road, Crane claimed Thomas had planned the theft, and Naomi had hidden the money. Gideon had never believed the tale. He believed it less with every step. "You're holding the horn too hard, Mrs. Rhodes," he said. "Your hands will lock." She loosened them a little. "Just keep moving. We have 15 miles to Vesta's. If we miss the eastbound, Hetty Wade will transfer west and be gone by nightfall." She promised one stop and no more. Naomi's voice rasped from thirst, but each word landed clean. "She saw Crane's men kill Thomas. She has copies of his accounts. Without her, Earl's lie becomes the only story anyone repeats." She looked down at him. My child will not be raised beneath it. That was not the voice of a helpless woman. Gideon heard the old station authority in it, the tone that could bring a drunk driver to heel and send a 6-horse team out on time. Crane's men cut your wagon before you reached the canyon, he said. They wanted the break to look natural. And the noose. They wanted you frightened enough to turn back, or too weak to object when they carried you. Naomi's mouth tightened. She reached behind the cantle for a small valise and fumbled with the buckle. May I? Gideon asked. I have it, the answer came sharply. She freed the strap, pulled out a folded canvas bundle, and held it against her chest. Her anger faded as quickly as it had risen. Baby clothes, nothing more. If I fall, you will not. If I do, keep them out of the dirt. The trust in that small request struck harder than it ought to have. Gideon took the bundle and tucked it inside his duster. I've got them, he said, and I've got no intention of giving them back to you dirty. For the first time, something almost like amusement touched her eyes. It vanished when the gelding stepped over loose shale and the movement jarred her. They pushed through a dry wash where brittle sage scratched Gideon's boots. The sun leaned westward. Naomi kept one hand over her belly and breathed through her teeth whenever the horse stumbled. She never complained. That worried him more than complaint would have. Gideon looked back toward the southern ridge. The distant dust had disappeared behind the broken hills, but he did not mistake absence for safety. We stop in that shade, he said. No. You are pale enough to shame flour. I have been insulted more elegantly. Then I'll try again after you drink. Her gaze sharpened. You said I chose. And you do. You may rest under the rock, or you may fall off the horse 10 yards beyond it. I dislike the second choice. He regretted the words as soon as they left him. Naomi's shoulders went rigid. Gideon halted the gelding. That sounded like an order. It did. I'm sorry. He met her eyes. I'm frightened for you, and I let it turn me rude. Will you stop for 10 minutes? The hard line of her mouth eased by a fraction. 10. He led the horse beneath an overhang. When he raised his hands to help her down, she shook her head and tried to swing her leg over the saddle. The change in balance pulled a from her. Gideon caught her at the waist before she slipped. Her boots touched dirt. She pushed away at once. I can stand. He released her. I see that. Naomi leaned against the rock, breathing hard. Gideon uncorked his canteen and set it on a flat stone between them instead of placing it in her hand. She stared at it, then at him. You learn quickly. Slow learning leaves deeper bruises. She reached for the canteen, but her fingers shook around the tin cup. Water spilled across the back of her hand. Gideon did not step forward. We can miss the stage. No. Your child matters more than Thomas's name. To me, they are not enemies. She drank slowly, lowering the cup whenever the trembling worsened. A dull ache dragged across her lower back and around the weight of her belly. Naomi shut her eyes and counted several careful breaths before it eased. Gideon watched the strain leave her face by degrees. Was that the child? The road. She opened her eyes. And a body telling me it has had enough of men, horses, and Nevada. That body may be the wisest one among us. When she returned the canteen, she placed it on the stone because her grip was not yet steady enough to hand it to him. She straightened too quickly, and her knees weakened. Gideon caught her elbow by instinct. Let go! He did so at once. Naomi pressed a hand to the rock. For several breaths, only the gelding's bit rings disturbed the quiet. I cannot bear another man deciding where I stand, she said at last. Earl has done it for 6 months. Thomas did it before he died, though he meant to protect me. He kept me away from meetings concerning ledgers I had balanced myself. Every man calls it care while he takes command. Gideon felt the words settle where they belonged. I hear you. You say that now. I'll have to prove it later. He moved away to check the saddle, giving her the shade and silence. When they were ready to leave, he guided the gelding beside a low stone. The animal tossed its head and sidestepped. He's contrary, Gideon said. I can hold. Stand clear. Naomi squared herself before the horse.
You will put your feet where I placed you, or I shall tell every mare from here to Utah that you were frightened by a tired widow. Step up. The gelding blinked, lowered his head, and moved neatly beside the stone. A laugh escaped Gideon before he could stop it. He has finally met lawful authority. Naomi climbed into the saddle with only a light touch from Gideon on her forearm. He met someone who knows when the figures do not balance. Her smile came small and unwilling, but it changed her whole face. Gideon looked away before she caught him staring. They went on with the sun at their backs. Gideon no longer walked ahead with the bridle in his fist. He kept beside her stirrup. Before touching the cinch, he asked. Before offering water, he let her ask with a glance. The changes were simple. They cost him more than drawing a gun would have. An hour later, they reached an abandoned relay hut, its roof sagging over one room and half its corral buried in sand. The gelding's neck was lathered. He needs 15 minutes, Gideon said. This time, I agree. He helped Naomi down after she nodded permission. Her legs failed the instant her weight came off the stirrup. Gideon took most of it until she found the ground, then released her before she had to ask. Inside, she lowered herself onto an old packing crate rather than sitting cleanly. One hand supported the underside of her belly, the other pressed against her lower back. Gideon watered the horse, checking the open country between each task. When he returned with biscuits and the canteen, Naomi's eyes were closed. Sweat had dried pale tracks through the dust at her temples. He took his place by the doorway, where he could watch the trail without blocking her path. Naomi reached for a biscuit. Her fingers trembled so badly that she could not break it. She rested it on her knee and breathed until the shaking eased. We stay longer, Gideon said. We stay until my hands obey me. That was my intended measure. It sounded more generous when I said it. She tried to smile, but another hard pull across her back stopped it. She leaned against the wall and waited, her jaw clenched, until the pain loosened. Gideon crouched several feet away. Naomi, the baby is moving, that is all. If you are wrong, I will tell you. She opened her eyes. I promise. He accepted the promise, because refusing it would mean refusing her judgment. Only after several more minutes did she manage half the biscuit and a careful drink. You do not hover, she said. A hovering man is only a guard with better manners. A quiet sound escaped her. Not quite a laugh, but nearer to one than anything he had heard all day. Before she could answer, Gideon saw movement beyond the doorway. 3 specks appeared on a distant ridge, dark against the white sky. He rose without touching his gun. Naomi followed his gaze. Them, likely. How long? Far enough that the horse gets 10 minutes, not 15. She folded the unfinished biscuit into her handkerchief. Then you would better speak quickly. You look as though something has been troubling you since Kansas. Gideon looked at her, surprised, despite himself. Naomi lowered her gaze to her raw palms. Thomas died because of me. He did not answer too quickly. I found the false charges in Crane's books, she continued. Feed billed twice. Freight that never existed. Cash boxes listed as lost before the coaches carrying them had even left.
Thomas wanted to let it pass. He said Earl was dangerous. I told him an honest man could not close his eyes to theft. Her voice thinned. He took the figures to the district office. 3 days later, he was dead.
She lifted her face. Tears made 2 clean paths through the dust at her temples. I demanded courage from him. Now I am asking it of you. Men stand where I point, and then they bleed. Gideon's old shame stirred. He had kept Billy's name buried because speaking it made the memory too alive. Yet Naomi had handed him the truth of her marriage without asking him to make it pretty. In Kansas, he said a crowd took a boy named Billy from a saloon, 19 years old. They said he had stolen a mare. Naomi waited. I knew he had not. I knew him. But I kept my seat because I needed work, and the men had rope. I told myself the sheriff would come. Gideon looked past her toward the riders on the ridge. Billy was dead by morning. The thieves were caught the next week. He faced her. You asked Thomas to stand in daylight. Crane killed him because Crane lives best in the dark. Do not carry his wickedness as though it were your debt. Naomi's eyes held his. The grief did not leave them, but it changed shape. Then her gaze dropped to his right hand. The rope had burned a raw stripe across the knuckles, and dried blood darkened his cuff. You are hurt. It will keep. So will stubbornness. Sit. The command surprised him enough that he obeyed. Naomi dampened a clean strip torn from the inner edge of her handkerchief. She took his hand with both of hers and wiped the grit from the burn. Her hands were still unsteady, forcing her to move slowly. Gideon watched her bent head. He had spent years leaving towns before anyone could expect him back. Now, the thought of her removing her hands left him oddly unsteady. She tied the cloth around his palm. There, she said. One less thing for me to feel guilty over. This was the rope's doing. The rope is not here to argue. His mouth pulled at one corner. You would win. I keep books. Winning arguments is the only entertainment the work provides. Outside, the gelding thrust his head through the broken doorway and stole the second half of Gideon's biscuit from the crate. Naomi stared at the empty spot. Your horse is a criminal. He has never been convicted. He has crumbs on his mouth. Circumstantial. Her laugh came before she could stop it. It was warm, low, and tired enough to end in a breath against the wall. Gideon forgot the pain in his hand. When she released him, he nearly closed his hand around hers. He stopped himself. Respect was easy when he felt nothing. With Naomi, restraint had begun to feel like lifting a weight. The riders on the ridge had descended out of sight. Gideon rose. We leave now. Naomi nodded. Help me stand. It was the first time she had asked without necessity forcing the words. He offered both hands. She chose one. The last miles passed in exhaustion and silence, measured by the gelding's steady hoofbeats and Gideon's backward glances. They reached Vesta Brennan's station as the sun touched the western rim. The adobe buildings smelled of coffee, wood smoke, horse sweat, and the stew Vesta had kept alive since noon. Vesta came into the yard with her sleeves rolled, and one look was enough to take in Naomi's condition, Gideon's wrapped hand, and the dust behind them. Back kitchen, she ordered, before either of you falls over and inconveniences me. Naomi managed a faint smile. Good evening to you, too. I reserve good evenings for people who arrive before supper. Vesta settled Naomi near the stove with tea. Gideon stood where he could see both doors. The eastbound is late, Vesta said. Hetty Wade is aboard. The telegraph agent confirmed she left Silver Peak this morning. Naomi closed her eyes. But Earl Crane is here, Vesta added. He has been buying whiskey and telling anyone with ears that Thomas's widow is fleeing with the stolen money. Gideon's jaw tightened. Vesta took a stage ticket from her apron and placed it on the table. Last seat on the westbound. It leaves in 20 minutes. Take it, Naomi. California is a long way from Earl Crane. Naomi stared at the ticket. Gideon wanted her to take it. The desire came fierce and immediate. He could put her aboard, stand between Crane and the wheels, and know that by morning she would be beyond his reach. It was the sort of choice Gideon made well, quick, hard, and for someone else. So he kept silent. Naomi looked at him. You want me on that stage. I want you alive. But you are not telling me to go. It is not my life. She rose and crossed the kitchen. Fatigue made the movement slow, but nothing uncertain remained in her face. You decide danger in a heartbeat, she said. You saw a rope and moved before I knew your name. Why stop now? Because on that trail, I finally understood what frightens you more than Crane. Her gaze did not leave his. A man may call it protection while he closes his hand over your choice, Gideon said. I will not be that man, even to keep you. The room went still. If I go, Naomi said, Thomas keeps the name Earl gave him. My child inherits it. If you stay, you face Crane and every person who believed him. Will you stand with me? The old Gideon would have answered with a gun. The man she had forced him to become understood that was not what she asked. I will stand where you can see me, he said, and when they give you room to speak, I will not take it from you. Boots struck the boardwalk outside. Vesta moved to the shutter and looked through the crack. Crane. 5 men. One has a rope. Gideon unbuckled his gun belt and held it out to her. Naomi's eyes widened. They are armed. If I wear this outside, Earl calls it a shootout. He says I am a hired gun helping a thief escape. Gideon placed the belt in Vesta's hands. If I go unarmed, he has to show the town what he truly is. He may shoot you. He may. Gideon looked at Naomi. Fear sharpened every line of her face. He wanted to promise what no man could promise. Instead, he said, I can open the space. You must decide what to do with it. Naomi drew one breath and straightened. Then open it. Gideon stepped onto the station porch. The last light lay red across the yard. Earl Crane stood below the steps with a tin star on his coat and a matchstick between his teeth. 5 men spread behind him. One coiled a lariat with slow, showy turns. Townspeople watched from the saloon rail, the blacksmith shop, and the hitching posts. Fear had brought them. Gideon meant to make them ashamed of it. Where is she? Crane demanded. Hand over the thief. There is no thief here. Naomi Rhodes is a fugitive. Her husband robbed the overland line, and she has the money. You are a freight contractor, wearing a badge you have no right to wear, Gideon said. You have no warrant and no judge. A murmur passed through the yard. Crane climbed the first step. Move! No. Crane came up fast and swung. Gideon could have slipped the blow. He could have broken the man's wrist before the fist landed. Instead, he planted his boots and took the punch across the mouth. Pain burst through his jaw. He stumbled against the porch post, tasted blood, and lowered his hands again. Behind the station door, Naomi's breath caught sharply enough for him to hear it. The crowd shifted. A lawful arrest did not begin with an armed man beating one who would not fight. Crane saw it too. His hand twitched toward his revolver, then stopped beneath 30 watching faces. Gideon spat blood into the dust and turned toward the station door.
Naomi. She came out with both hands resting over her child, not hiding the pregnancy and not using it as a shield. Vesta stood behind her with a double-barreled shotgun pointed toward the floor.
Naomi's voice carried across the yard.
Earl Crane, my husband found 3 sets of figures proving you build the overland line twice for feed, then hired men to rob coaches belonging to your competitors.
She lies, Crane shouted. I am not finished.
The authority in those 4 words silenced him. You had Thomas killed after he reported you. Today, your men cut my wagon tongue and left this on it. Naomi took the severed noose from beneath her shawl and dropped it at Crane's feet. The rope struck the dust with almost no sound. Still, every person in the yard seemed to hear it. Hetty Wade is on the eastbound, Naomi continued. She saw your men ride away from Thomas's body. She carries copies of the accounts. You meant to drag me back before she arrived and call my death an escape. Crane looked at the men beside him. 2 had already stepped away. You will believe a desperate widow, he called to the crowd.
The blacksmith came forward, wiping his hands on his apron. I reckon we will wait for Hetty. Another man moved beside him. Then Vesta's hostler. Then the saloon keeper who would not meet Naomi's eyes, but stood all the same. No one touched Crane. They did something worse. They stopped standing behind him. Crane backed down from the step, his face mottled with rage. Without the town's fear, the badge on his coat looked like what it was, a bit of stolen tin. Gideon turned toward Naomi. The yard tilted for a moment. His lip was split and his jaw had begun to swell. Her knees softened. He reached her before she fell, one arm around her waist. This time she leaned into him. You let him strike you, she whispered. He needed to look like himself. You are a fool. Likely. A brave fool. That costs extra. A breath of laughter broke through her fear. It was brief and shaky, but Gideon felt it against his chest. The westbound driver called final boarding. Beyond the eastern bend, a plume of stage dust rose into the sunset. Gideon drew Vesta's ticket from his coat and held it out. You still have a choice. Hetty is not here yet. Naomi looked at the ticket, then at the distant stage. If you wish to leave, he said, I will see the coach clear of town. If you stay, I stay. No debt either way. Her eyes searched his bruised face. You truly would let me go? No. The answer came before caution could soften it. I would help you go. There is a difference, and I would hate every mile of it. Naomi went very still. Gideon had faced armed drovers with less fear than he felt then. He could have hidden behind duty, but that was only another form of silence. I do not want only the dangerous hours, he said. I want the mornings when the coffee burns. I want to hear you scold that horse. I want to be there when your child is born, if you ask me. I want to return somewhere, instead of merely passing through. Naomi's breath trembled. I loved Thomas, she said. Part of me always will. I would think less of you if it did not. I will not have him erased. I am not asking for his place. Gideon lowered his voice. I am asking whether one day at a time I may make a place of my own beside you. The brass bell of the eastbound stage rang from the road. Naomi looked at the westbound ticket once more. Then she tore it across the middle and let the pieces fall. She crossed to Gideon's gelding and untied the split reins from the rail. She kept one in her left hand and put the other in his bandaged palm. I spent half a year with men trying to drive my life for me, she said. So hear me plainly, Gideon Gentry. I am staying. I am clearing Thomas's name.
And I am asking you to stay beside me." His throat closed. "Plain enough," he managed. Naomi's mouth trembled into a smile. "Good. I dislike repeating figures." Gideon drew her into his arms only after she stepped toward him. She held him with one arm around his neck and the other curved between them over her child. The embrace was not a rescue. It was an answer.
The eastbound rolled into the yard in a storm of dust and harness bells. Hetty Wade stepped down, carrying a worn satchel. She was narrow, sun-browned, and brisk enough to make Vesta look leisurely. Crane moved to intercept her. Hetty did not slow. "Touch this satchel, Earl, and I shall break it over your head." The blacksmith laughed once. Crane did not. Hetty placed copies of the ledgers and the original freight invoices into Vesta's hands. Then she faced the crowd. "I saw 2 of Crane's riders leave Thomas Rhodes beside the South Road," she said. "Thomas was alive when I reached him. He named Earl before he died." Crane lunged for the satchel. 3 townsmen seized him before his revolver cleared leather. The blacksmith twisted Crane's arms behind him, and Vesta's hostler tied his wrists with the same lariat Crane's men had brought for Naomi. The deputy marshal would arrive the following morning. By then, no one in town was willing to call Crane a lawman. The papers confirmed the crime. The people ended his power. After the yard emptied, Vesta drove Gideon and Naomi into the back kitchen and set a basin between them. "You," she told Gideon, "sit before your jaw swells shut." "You," she told Naomi, "drink the broth before I pour it into you." Neither argued. Gideon remembered the canvas bundle inside his duster. He drew it out and placed it in Naomi's lap. She unfolded the cloth. 2 flannel shirts, a knitted cap, and a pair of absurdly small stockings lay clean inside. "You kept them out of the dirt," she said. "I said I would." Naomi touched the cap with one finger. "Thomas chose the yellow yarn. He said a child born in Nevada ought to carry a little sunlight." Gideon did not answer with comfort. Some grief deserved a chair at the table. A movement passed beneath Naomi's dress. She caught her breath and pressed her palm to the place. "The baby!" Objecting to Vesta's broth, perhaps. "Then the child has judgment," Vesta said from the stove. Naomi looked at Gideon. After a moment, she held out her hand. He gave her his bandaged one. She placed it gently against the curve of her belly. A small, firm kick met his palm. Wonder struck him silent. "This does not belong to the dangerous hours," Naomi said. "No. And it does not erase Thomas. Nothing could." Her fingers closed over the back of his hand. "Then stay for this hour, too." Gideon sat beside her while Vesta complained about the quality of men, horses, telegraph operators, and broth spoons. Naomi ate. The baby kicked twice more. For once, Gideon did not search the windows for the next road. He stayed until morning. 7 months later, winter had loosened its grip on the valley. Naomi drove a new buckboard toward the supply depot, with a baby sleeping in a padded basket at her feet. The Overland office had appointed her station keeper after Hetty's accounts cleared Thomas's name and exposed the money Crane had stolen. Naomi had accepted the post on 2 conditions. Her books were not to be questioned by men who had not read them, and Vesta was to receive a new stove before the next snow. The office had agreed to both. Vesta claimed the second mattered more. Hoofbeats approached from behind. Gideon brought his brown gelding alongside the wagon exactly level with the seat. He wore a clean shirt and carried no bedroll. Naomi glanced at his light saddlebags. "You have forgotten half your belongings." "I left them at the station." "That sounds dangerously like confidence." "It is worse. I have a drawer now." "What is in it?"
One clean shirt, 2 socks that nearly match, and a spoon. Vesta says I stole. You did steal it. I was invited to keep it. By whom? The spoon and I reached an understanding. She tried to keep a straight face and failed. The baby woke at the sound and made a small, offended noise from the basket. Gideon tipped his hat toward the child. Your mother encourages disrespect. Naomi looked down fondly. Your defense is weak, Mr. Gentry. Gideon had turned down the long cattle drives. He took shorter escort work and returned each week, not because Naomi needed guarding,
but because he had learned that staying was an action a man had to choose more than once. At the fork beyond town, one road climbed toward the high pasture, and the other ran to the depot. Naomi shifted the team toward the valley without asking which way he preferred. The baby stirred. Gideon leaned from the saddle to tuck the corner of the blanket away from the child's face. He waited until Naomi nodded before touching it. You may make yourself useful, Mr. Gentry, she said. I live in hope. She held the driving lines easily, the road open before her. Ride with me. The first time those words had been a command spoken against danger. Now they were hers. Gideon kept his horse at her side. Always.